Thank you so much for joining us on the panel, Voices from the Frontline of the Transnational Agricultural Labour Movement. And I'm sorry that we have come on a couple of minutes late, and this is because we are functioning in 2 languages. We're from the transnational arena. Oh, I'm not, I'm in the UK, but I'm really, really pleased to have 3 guests today who will be able to give us some insights and be able to tell us a lot more about agricultural workers, their daily struggles, and their recent challenges in the light of the global pandemic. And they will also be able to tell us what's already happening and how we can stand in solidarity with them and the workers that they represent as we go through this session. So I'm reminded to speak slowly because there is simultaneous translation in Italian and English. My name is Lydia Medland. I'm based at the University of Bristol, and I work on this issue, so far having focused on Spain and Morocco. So these cases will be as interesting to me as they will be to you, because Italy is a case that we hear not enough about in the UK, and the struggles of the Mexican-US border of the farm workers there is one that there is really so much to learn from that we are really waiting to hear more from Carlos about what's going on there. Okay. Yeah? Okay, thanks. So first we have Nino Quaranta, who is from the De la Terra Contadinanza Cooperative, Contadinanza Necesaria Cooperative. He comes from a peasant background, and he now returns to work on agroecological projects, working most notably alongside migrant workers in Italy. And he is believing in food for nourishment and for agroecology, and in working in solidarity with workers. We also have from Italy Martina Locasio, who is both a member of the European coordination of Via Campesina, as well as being a researcher as well at the University of Parma. She deals with migrant work in agriculture as well for her research, and she's an activist with Contraddizioni Furori Mercato. Finally, Carlos Marentes is joining us from La Via Campesina, the International Committee of La Via Campesina, where he coordinates the Committee on Migration and Rural Workers for them. And he joins us from the US, where he works on cross-border issues, and he's been a farm labor organizer and advocate since 1977. He's the founder and director of the Border Agricultural Workers Project, and he works especially with chili pickers on both sides of the US-Mexican border. So there's so much more richness that these speakers have to offer, and I will turn now to them. So firstly, I wanted to ask all of the speakers just to tell us a little bit about who are the workers that they are interacting with daily and helping in their struggles. Who are they, and what kinds of agricultural products are they working with? What are the foods that come from their labours to our supermarkets or to our markets? Thanks. So I'm going to turn first to Carlos, then to Martina, and then to Nino. So Carlos, perhaps you could say a couple of words.
Thank you, Lydia. First, I'd like to express my gratitude for the invitation to be part of this conversation. I'm very happy to join my colleagues, Nino and Martina. Martina is a woman that I admire and respect a lot for her work on the struggle to defend the rights of migrants in Italy and many parts of Europe. I'm connecting exactly from the United States-Mexico border. From my window, south of my window, I can see the Mexican landscape, but I'm in El Paso, Texas, in the American side. So for the almost 4 years, I've been organizing agriculture workers in this border region in an attempt to push them to form a collective force that will enable them to change the reality of oppression and exploitation that they suffer every day. But who are the farm workers that I work with? The farm workers that I work with in the American side, in general, in United States and in many other countries, are those peasants that at one point were unable to keep working their land and then lost their capacity to produce the food for their families and for their communities. Once they lost that capacity, that ability to take care of their land, they were forced to migrate into the north, and they became part of the farm labor force of the north. Here in the United States, we have, according to the government, from 2.5 to 4 million agriculture workers. They are the ones that produce the food that sustain United States society and other parts of the world. The majority of whom, at one point were peasants in Mexico, but were displaced by the neoliberal policies imposed by the North, the free trade agreements, and the farm policies of the North that give a few multinational, transnational corporations involved in agriculture and food production the ability to destroy peasants' economies and rural communities. And those are the workers who are now being exploited in the United States. We have been organizing them in this border region. Most of the agricultural production is of vegetables. We have a very important crop that is famous in the United States. Used to be a Mexican product, chili, pepper, hot sauce. Used to be a Mexican thing, but suddenly the North American consumer discovered chili, and is now a very famous product, agricultural product. So most of the agricultural workers that I organize, from 5,000 to 12,000 agricultural workers in the border region of El Paso, Texas, southern New Mexico, and Ciudad Juarez, are chili pickers. And they are the most neglected sector, the most marginalized sector of the labor force in the United States. But in general, agricultural workers all over the world are, the most oppressed sector of our labor force. The reason, because they receive low wages, they work under unsafe and dangerous working conditions, is because the majority are migrants. They are from other countries that cross to the north in order to produce the food that sustains humanity. But in the most of the cases, they don't, in return for their contribution to society, they don't get the same benefits and rights that other groups of workers, native workers, enjoy. So these are the workers that I have been organizing, mainly from Mexico, who work in the United States for many months of the year during the agricultural cycle. Many of them who are women also. The farm labor force in the United States and in other parts is increasingly, becoming more and more women being farm laborers working in the land. And those are the ones that I work, that I try to organize every day so they can improve their life, they can improve their salaries and their working conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So if we pass to Martina to tell us about that context in southern Italy. Thank you. lost Martina. Okay, well that's fine. We can stay with Italy and go first to Nino. Nino, could you tell us a little bit about the workers that you work with, and indeed yourself? I know you are also involved in getting your hands in the soil and the kind of produce that you bring us.
Sì, certo. Io lavoro in campagna, innanzitutto.
I work in the countryside. Well, good evening to all of you, first of all. My name is Nino Quaranta, and I represent a social cooperative. Its name is Della Terra Contadinanza Necessaria. This is the name of the cooperative in Italian. The cooperative was founded on the 14th of May 2020 amid the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Why is the name of this cooperative important? Well, because we intend to focus on land, and that's our starting point. Carlos had said some certain things that we share. He mentioned the exploitation of migrant workers, especially rural workers. Well, this is something in common that we have. Here in Calabria, where I live, that is to say in the southern part of the Italian peninsula, right in front of Sicily, there is widespread exploitation of migrants. And that is because there is a very high number of workers who come from the sub-Saharan region. They flee conflicts, they flee poverty. And oftentimes they come from Libya, where we know the conditions are like hell. And they come to Calabria to work in the countryside, and especially to pick citrus fruits. We also pick olives here. And during the harvesting season of both olives and citrus fruits, there is a very high concentration of migrant workers, whose number amounts to 3,000 people. It would be nice if these workers, if these people, had the same rights as all the other workers. And this is the reason why I was saying that this aspect is shared between Carlos and me. These workers do not have the same rights as other workers, other seasonal workers, in fact. Why so? Well, their labor rights are denied. Landowners illegally hire them and recruit them. These landowners do not respect labor rights, and they pay migrant workers miserably. These workers get 20 euros for a workday. So what we are trying to do is give these people the opportunity to live a dignified life and have a job that is paid as it should be. Our day of working in the field here in this area costs around 43 net euros, and that would be 56 if we include taxes. So we are trying to make sure that these people can work according to decent working conditions and decent wages. We're also trying to focus on agroecological practices. We're also striving to grant these people dignified housing. As you know, these people live in slums or in ghettos. And in these slums, there are up to 500 people all packed together. They live in areas where there's no running water, no electricity, no sanitation, no basic services for any civilized society. The people who work with our cooperative receive a dignified job in the countryside, and what they also receive thanks to the support of the Spartacus project, Let's Free the Slaves of Rossano, this is the name of the project. As I was saying, these workers also received dignified housing solutions. Our workers, our migrant workers, live in very normal houses, in decent houses, and they live in the towns and cities near where they work. This is fundamental. I would also like to add that in the Gionotauro plain, there are ghettos, and these people are sent to live in these ghettos in tents or in ramshackle buildings. And there are also 34,000 houses that the population, that are not assigned to the population, only in the Gionotauro plain, which is made up of 30 municipalities. So there are 34,000 available houses that are not used. However, these people, these migrant workers, are not assigned these houses. They are sent to live in ghettos. So we are really focusing our efforts on social and agroecological agriculture, and we are trying to use its tools to ensure dignity, guarantee dignity to these people. As Carlos was also saying, farmers are not highly thought of, generally speaking, and that's a shame. I was lucky enough to be born into a family of farmers, and I was also able to study literature at the University of Milan. So I am a farmer by choice. I have chosen to be a farmer today, and I really like working at the land, tilling the land. I like the relationship I have with the land. I don't want to violate, in a way, the land. However, I recognize that most fellow citizens of mine do not think highly of agriculture. They think of agriculture as something low level, a low-skilled kind of job. We're trying to add value to agriculture because agriculture is what feeds us all and fits the planet too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nino. Some really important themes already coming in there. So Martina, could you complete the picture and tell us a little about your work? Thank you.
Sì, buonasera a tutte e tutti.
Good evening. Thank you very much to the interpreters, and thank you very much, Lydia. The connection is lagging a lot. I'm really happy to be able to meet Nina and Carlos, who are points of reference for me. They are points of reference in a shared struggle. The Italian Rural Association is a member of La Via Campesina, and it works in various regions in Italy. And it fights to promote agroecology and solidarity. My group is a local group, and it works in Sicily mainly, between Palermo and Trapani, also in the south of Italy. There have been significant changes in this area too, in terms of agriculture and the economy in general. This is a land of emigration. Over the past 20 years, the production model has changed drastically. Olive crops has been an established production method, it is considered to be a high-quality niche production. It is certified as a high-quality niche production. So now we have olive groves all over the place. And we need labor force, flexible labor force, ready-to-use labor force to take care of these olive groves. And the landscape has changed significantly as a consequence. I mainly work with olives used to make oil and to eat. My working group was created in 2015 out of a meeting of precarious Sicilian workers who were trying to find their own path for their future. We met seasonal workers who were living in the ghettos that Nino was mentioning, and our encounter with these migrant workers changed our life. We immediately felt the need to fight against exploitation. Their whole life in those ghettos was an example of exploitation. These ghettos were not institutional, they were self-organized. However, actions need to be taken to solve the situation, to find a solution for these ghettos. Back then, these workers was absolutely invisible to the eyes of the institutions. So we met in Sicily and we understood that we were to act together to make our voices heard as a group. We needed to organize ourselves and act to put an end to this kind of isolation. We needed initiatives to promote sociability, to meet local people. So we put our minds together to find an alternative to our life. We started producing in an agroecological way, and we created this group with the workers that we met. We've always striven to focus on agroecology and also to work with the trade unions. This year is a very special year because we've seen significant media coverage of these irregular migrants who were afraid of not being able to access food. And finally, we have realized how important these workers are as they pick the food that we eat. Therefore, we now know that we need to strengthen our fight. We have to find a way to do that. And we have to claim our human rights, make sure that they are respected, and make sure that these workers are recognized and acknowledged for their work. We want to support the basic needs of these people, and therefore we have launched a campaign Its name was Portiamo l'acqua al ghetto, let's bring water to the ghetto. I'm sorry, but the connection is really lagging. I can't understand what you're saying.
Okay. We have been able to fully understand the link between the agro-industry and agro-industrial practices, climate change and exploitation. Migrant workers were not able to exert their right to social distancing during the pandemic. They were not able to wash their hands because they had no running water to do so. I think we've lost Martina. Okay, I think we could move. Martina has just brought in the next topic, which we really wanted to make sure we could address in this session, which is what has been the biggest impacts of the COVID pandemic on the situation for migrant workers in agriculture, especially industrial agriculture, and what have been the ways in which you have mobilized to tackle these challenges. So if I could bring back Carlos and ask you about the impacts of the pandemic and what you've been able to do to help workers, that would be brilliant. And we'll come back to Martina in a minute to take up those points.
Okay.
Thank you. This crisis of humanity with the pandemic that has created a terrible situation for all of us. Everybody, everywhere is suffering the impact of the coronavirus crisis. Everywhere we see suffering, death, destitution, the inability of many people to survive. Yes, this morning, the news, the local news here in the United States was that 380,000 people have died in the United States as of this morning. And United States is followed by other countries, India, Brazil, Russia, and United Kingdom. So the pandemic crisis is serious. Actually, this conference takes place during terrible times. Thus, the importance of this conference, because we need to find a way out of this terrible, terrible situation. Back in March, when the government decided to stop many activities and to close certain sectors of the economies in order to contain COVID-19, they accepted agricultural labor. Farm workers suddenly were categorized as essential workers. They needed to continue working in agriculture in order to produce the food needed by the population to survive the crisis. But they failed in providing the most basic measures of protection for agricultural workers. They were sent back to the fields with instructions to continue working. Most of the farm workers in the United States who are from Mexico, from Central America, or the Caribbean, were afraid to go back to work in the fields because they knew the seriousness of the situation, but they had no other option because the little that they earn in agricultural production in the north is the needed funds, the needed resources so their families can survive back home. So they became suddenly essential workers, but without any measure of protection on the parts of the governments, and it's very clear here in the United States. So the coronavirus situation have created lots of suffering amongst agricultural workers, and especially also in the rural communities. Most of the efforts by the governments to contain the COVID-19 has been focused on the big cities, New York, Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles, but the rural areas have been basically abandoned from the emergency measures of prevention. So farm workers in the area where I work, every day they go to work in the fields at midnight, and they are transported in overcrowded vehicles. A few weeks ago, I saw a van, a vehicle that has the capacity for 16 passengers, and 20 workers were being transported in that van. In the fields, there's no social distancing. Most of the agriculture, most of the farms, and the owners of the farms prefer to concentrate all the workers in one part of the field in order to monitor and supervise them. They don't create social distances in the field. Plus, there's no application of health and safety standards in the fields. That's typical of United States agriculture. So we started to organize the agricultural workers into committees, and we convinced the workers that they needed to protect themselves because there was a very, very clear exclusion from society. You remember that in the United States, racism is still a very important ingredient of the economy. And when we speak about farm workers, and when we say that most of the farm workers, according to the government figures, are mainly migrants, well, there's no regard for the lives of these people. And there's no concern for the lives of the impoverished families of the agricultural workers. So the situation is really bad. The social exclusion, is something very serious. Now, something that is very important that we mention is that the situation of the agricultural workers was already bad before this pandemic crisis. Before the pandemic crisis, they were already suffering, as Nino say, for the lack of enjoyment of basic rights, basic benefits. In United States, agricultural workers don't have the right to organize. They don't have the right to collective bargaining, to create unions, to create organizations that can help them, put pressure to the owners of the farms. And so that's a very important right that every worker should have: the right to organize, the right to create unions, the right to create a collective force to pressure better improvement in their salaries and their working conditions. So now we are facing a very serious situation. Our main efforts at this moment are, since now apparently the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine, has created a hope for the containment of the coronavirus. We are trying to pressure so farm workers are not excluded, since they are essential and since they continue to be in the field risking their lives to produce the food that feed us. They should be part of the people receiving the vaccine. So, but the situation is really bad. But the situation was bad before. Historically, agricultural workers all over the world has been excluded and has been systematically discriminated because the majority are migrants. In the United States, migrants are not, considered the same as everybody in America. And, that's the main problem with agricultural production that is based on the exploitation of migrant labor. And the pandemic has aggravated that oppression and that exploitation. Thank you.
Thank you again, Carlos. I just want to ask if Nino or Martina would like to add anything to that. We've already got some really important messages of the problems of racism, exclusion, devaluing of workers across the board. But Nino, if you wanted to add anything, or Martina, please do, and then I'll come to a couple of questions from the audience.
Grazie. Io volevo aggiungere
Thank you. I wanted to say that I fully agree with what Carlo has said. There is racism, and racism is not something that we only find in the US. Intolerance and racism also exist here in Europe, unfortunately. I wanted to add something, however. This serious situation, this pandemic, has not been sent to us as a punishment by God. It was created by people. It was created by the abusive actions of people on our planet. And I also wanted to say that this tragedy, this pandemic, has highlighted the need to further develop the public sector over the private sector. So liberalism has been unmasked in a way. When you need food, you go to those people who produce food. But those who produce food are not enabled to work in safe working conditions. I can mention the ghettos I was talking about earlier on. The people living in these ghettos cannot practice any social distancing. They have no right to access the healthcare system, be it public or private. So the situation is dire. If there's something positive that the pandemic has highlighted, is that it has shown the entire world, it has shown common people like us that you cannot only focus on making profit. You also need to nurture the humanity that has been lost over the last few decades. And the pandemic has highlighted this aspect. This is what I wanted to add. This was my contribution. I think it's very important to rediscover the humanity that we've lost in this situation, in this historical period.
Thank you, Nino. Yeah, thank you very much. So I want to ask a couple of the questions that have come from the chat now. One is, you've already mentioned, Carlos, about the strike. So there was a question about, have you been involved in any strikes or disputes involving migrant workers? And I think maybe you've already mentioned some of that, but if you wanted to say anything more, then that's an invitation too. But I'd like to add a second question, which is a more of a conceptual question about, which is, how do the struggles of agricultural migrant workers fit into the concept of food sovereignty? And I ask you, as members of La Via Campesina that promotes food sovereignty, and of course this panel was also put together, and we were helped to be bring together here by La Via Campesina and the Land Workers Alliance. There's a member of Via Campesina, so I should have thanked them at the beginning. But yeah, so how do you think we can think about these struggles of farm workers as part of food sovereignty or a movement for it? Thanks.
Maybe Martina also can help with the responses to those two questions. Of course, you know, the only way that workers, farm workers, or any group of workers have in order to improve their lives, their wages, their working conditions, is to act collectively. And, you know, and collectively, they have to pressure the agriculture industry, agribusiness, in order to, you know, to be able to improve their salaries and working conditions, because there's no protection on the part of the government. The government, most of the governments, such as the case of United States, protect the interests of the big agriculture transnational corporations. Just to give you an example, we just found that last year, 2020, agricultural subsidies were over $46 billion. 46, 2020, you know, the year of the pandemic. In 2019, it was half of that amount. 22.7 billion. So during the pandemic, when the government supposed to react in support of those people suffering the consequences, the social, the health, and the economic consequences of the pandemic crisis, the governments were subsidizing agricultural production of the big agricultural transnational corporations. So the farm workers don't have any other alternative but to organize and to collectively pressure for changes to the reality of oppression and exploitation that they suffer. The problem is that in the United States, farm workers don't have the right to organize. Workers all over the place have the right to organize, to form unions, and to present in a collective manner and powerful manner their grievances to the employers, to the owners of the companies, not the farm workers. They were excluded. What is the relationship between food sovereignty and the exploitation of migrant workers? I just mentioned at my first intervention that the agricultural workers all over the place, especially here in the United States, are those peasants that suddenly were sent into bankruptcy by the agricultural corporations, transnational corporations, and by the neoliberal policies of the governments that protect agro capital. So they are the peasants. The peasants that at one point were displaced by their communities and that were sent either to the desert of Arizona or to Mediterranean Sea in order to enter the north and to seek the means of survival. So that's one part. The other part is that if farm workers in the north continue to be exploited, everybody will be affected because they will be used by agribusiness to weaken the efforts of small-scale producers, of farmers, like Nino mentioned, this effort, to give, the real meaning to cultivation of land instead of, of the money-making or profit-making purposes for food, the relationship as nature of land, the social, relationship of human beings. So there cannot be food sovereignty if we don't stop the exploitation of agricultural workers, because the exploitation of agricultural workers is what enables big agribusiness to oppose the alternative of food sovereignty as we have presented, as we present in La Via Campesina. And I'd like to also mention something very important. Food sovereignty is not a political slogan or a trendy cachet. Food sovereignty is another way of relationship with the land, of relationship with nature. It's about producing food to satisfy the nutritional needs of people, but also it's a way of producing food and at the same time, protecting the integrity of nature. That's a very important concept. Food these days is a commodity and should be something sacred, should be something that is part of us, is part of our identity, is part of our history or culture. Food is a central part of everything that we are. So food sovereignty can only be accomplished if we include as a central element, as Nino say, and as my compañera Martina will reaffirm, the respect for the human rights. And and as we state in organization, food sovereignty is about embracing something that we call oppression-free food that is not causing suffering to human beings or to nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we don't have much time now. I'm going to see if we can speak to Martina for last time very briefly and ask Martina one of the questions, which is, what message would you give to consumers in other countries who are maybe buying the olives or other produce being produced in these regions?
Appunto, a partire anche dal... È sempre un piacere sentire Carlos. A
It's
partire
always a pleasure to listen to Carlos. So, in Italy, we must continue supporting the fight of farmers to access food, to organize into unions. So when we saw that the working conditions for migrant workers were worsening, we also saw the closure of food markets in Italy. So for such an association as the Italian Rural Association in Italy, it has been important to fight to reopen these markets and to help farmers continue producing food to ensure the financial sustenance. In Italy, there's been a migrant strike on the 20th of May, and migrants have highlighted their fight against large retailers. So consumers, workers, farmers must join their forces and build not only a political alliance, but also a common organization so that they can better understand how to foster and support their organization and their communities. So we have worked hard to reach the farms, reach the markets, and support workers. And when they went on strike on the 20th of May, workers recognized these two sides of the same coin. They claimed food sovereignty as part of a single struggle, a single fight. And at the same time, laws have been passed over the past few months, including a law that has given further power to employers rather than employees, and tools to use to blackmail workers. And this law is a total failure. However, it highlights the main message being conveyed, which is that of not imposing laws top down. What matters most is listening to workers and to what they're saying and take their message into account. Their voices must be heard. Food is essential, just as it is its relationship with health. However, what we've seen so far is that the voice of employers has been heard, but not that of workers. So consumers too need to feel part of the farmers' community, and they also must contribute to building and ensuring food sovereignty. We also have to support seasonal workers and help them make their voices heard. This is the main message that we're trying to convey based on our struggles, based on our work in the past few months.
Okay.
We always focus on food sovereignty, we always focus on labor rights and on solidarity, including international solidarity among workers and farmers.
Okay, thank you very much, Martina. I'm really glad that we got you back. I'm going to ask for a 1-minute response from Nino for a final note of hope. What is the most important things that could be done to improve the situation here in the future? What can we hope for? Or what can we work towards?
Sì, grazie.
Thank you. I'd like to thank again La Via Campesina. We work together sometimes because the Italian Rural Association is a member of La Via Campesina, so we often work together thanks to this membership. So I want to send a message of hope. As Carlos was saying earlier on, we must start with ourselves first. I have a proposal, and I always put it forward whenever I'm given the chance to speak. We must strengthen the direct relationship between consumers and producers, between farmers and consumers. During the pandemic, we have set up an online marketplace in order to reach as many people as possible. There are two goals that we can achieve. The first goal is that if we sell directly to consumers, then we can hire a great number of workers, for example, to pick citrus fruits. The second goal is that of reducing prices. The price of high quality produce should not be too high. It should be affordable to anyone. So I hope that our shared work, the work that you're all carrying out, the work carried out by La Via Campesina and all the farmers associations and organizations, I hope that their work can contribute to change the culture of egoism and profit into a culture of humanity, which is put at the center.
Thank you so much for that ending. Thank you so much to all three speakers, to Nino, to Carlos, and to Martina. It's been really, really fascinating and very important to listen to you. We will be having a Zoom breakout session now to continue the conversation. There won't be simultaneous translation, so we'll do what we can. And yeah, it's been really my pleasure, and thank you again to the Land Workers Alliance for bringing us together, and to La Via Campesina who have helped bring international speakers. So yeah, thank you very much to all, and perhaps we'll see you in the Zoom.